Hello and welcome to everyone for joining our first episode of Scaling in APAC. We're really excited to be doing this together and we're glad that you're able to join us as well. Ming Song and I, we met because we're both part of the same cult. The first time that we met, something that became quite apparent to us is that we both service the exact same target customer base, which is tech companies, so tech startups, scale-ups, unicorns, but we do so from a complementary angle. But we also have two very complementary views on it, in the sense that my business does something completely different to what Ming Song does, but we both have a real passion for Asia Pacific and for the weird, wonderful, unique, sometimes outright bizarre and highly successful stories that you find in this part of the world when it comes to tech. So we wanted to add value back to the audience, both back to global companies trying to break into APAC, as well as local companies that are trying to widen their presence by sharing tips, expertise from people who we consider to be absolutely gold class, gold standard experts. So that's why we're sitting in front of you now, and we thought we'd make it even more interesting by having an Australian and a Singaporean of two different countries and two different cultures perspectives. So that's my sales pitch, and hopefully we'll take some money from you as well in the process.
And it's important to know that we bring very different sets of strengths and weaknesses to this ecosystem. I'll probably focus more on the strengths part because you are a natural hustler, you're a natural networker, and I think myself and my team, we are fairly good at organizing. So let's play things to both our strengths. I remember one of these conversations that we had. So we want this session to be really bringing lots of value to tech startups out there and scale-ups, and we are going to hear a lot from speakers whom we've lined up together in the next 6 to 12 episodes. This session is going to happen very, very regularly, once a month, and they'll be sharing their battle stories. That's important. I really look forward to hearing these battle stories from speakers who have deep knowledge and they've been in the trenches, they've actually been there, done that, and let's learn from them how they make their riches. Yeah. So maybe let's do a little bit of a shameless plug. Colin, tell us a little bit more about Scalerr and what you exactly do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've got plenty of battle stories. I have one with my wife pretty much every single week. But in terms of professionally, so I'm the founder of Scalerr. We're a management consulting firm. We've expanded ourselves into 6 markets internationally, and what we do is we help technology companies to scale. As a business, we've worked with 500 businesses. I believe the number is about 48 of which have gone on to hit unicorn status and scaling them into new global markets. So there's 2 parts of my company. The first one is we help companies with go-to-market. How do you get into Asia Pacific? How do you get into Europe? How do you do North America? Because there's so many complexities of Asia Pacific. So we hold their hand through that. But the second one is recruitment. And we've combined the two because you can have the most amazing go-to-market strategy, but if you don't have the right people to execute it, you're going to waste a lot of money. But at the same time, if you recruit this amazing team, and we specialize in doing board, executive, sales, and go-to-market hires, but if they don't actually know how to do go-to-market, then you're going to make a big hiring mistake. So we've combined those two worlds. Let's get you the right people. Let's deploy the right go-to-market, and then let's 10, 20, 30, 100x your company. And yes, I've rehearsed that sales pitch about 50 times. Ming Song, what do you do?
Right, so MediaShock was founded by myself and my other partner who is now based in our Shanghai, China office more than a decade ago. So we started off as a video production company, but right now we are an agency helping tech and engineering companies scale in APAC by telling better stories so that we can help them connect their mission to their audience. So there was this particular incident and this conference that I attended, I think way back in 2013. It was a fairly large tech conference, and it has all the shebangs, all the big scale stuff, right?
Shebangs.
And as I sat through that keynotes, I could feel the energy from the speaker out there. He has lots of passion in the innovation that they were pushing out. But as I turned left and right, I could see lots of nodding heads, but actually I got to find out that people are probably falling asleep, right? So I seriously think they had great content, and it actually attracted me because I'm a geek by nature, right? I remember that particular show was that was a prelude to the kind of generative AI technology that we are using right now. But I really think the way the story was told had lots of room to improve. So at MediaShock, we believe that outstanding technology is hidden by bad storytelling.
Yeah.
So being geeks ourselves, we see this magic this technology can offer the world. And we want to help companies out there showcase how their products can make the world a better and more efficient place.
Yeah.
And more sustainable as well these days. So I've got this very easy to understand example. People tend to say it's predictive analytics with awesome algorithm capable of detecting fluctuations in water and water levels and temperature. What do you exactly get out of it? Lots of jargon. You probably has zero idea of what I kind of just said. And that's very, very common. People just blabber lots of jargon. Yeah, but one simple way to say the same old thing, right, is our technology helps protect lives, helps protect properties by providing flood and forest fire warnings. So just tweaking that little message goes a long way.
Yeah. Look, I have to say it's something that I strongly agree with. And I've met many really, really interesting founders, and a lot of the time it's a technical founder where I've invented the next flux capacitor and they tell me about how amazing it is and it's a $12 trillion market, and they tell me about it for 30 minutes, and at the end of it I'm like, so what do you actually do? People do realize, but at an early stage I see that this is quite a problem where get to the point, what is the problem in the world that you're solving? Because if you can clearly articulate the problem in the world that you're solving, even if it's a technical product, if you can simplify it, you can win a sale. If you can simplify it and demonstrate the problem and you can be captivating in your storytelling, you can raise capital. And it's the same thing, you and I have spoken about this as well. If you're a global business that's trying to break into APAC, or let's just say you're a Chinese company who's trying to go into Southeast Asia or Australia. Well, now you actually need to take your story and you now need to be able to translate it into a different language. And storytelling is really, really important. So I'm looking forward to covering all of the facets of being able to scale a company, from storytelling to what VCs are looking for. So I encourage everyone to stay to the end, as we would love to hear some of your feedback and what it is that you think. We're going to be conducting a poll, so feel free to submit any of your questions during the seminar. And we hope that you get a lot of value and then engage us, as we need your money.
Right. So let's get the real meat of this session started. So if you are a startup trying to grow in APAC, in fact, not only startups, if you're trying to grow your business and land yourself in a new market like APAC, especially in the tech space, we'll have Colin who will share 3 very important actionable tips that you can take home immediately and implement. And that's likely to 3x or even 10x your business, maybe more. So take it away.
Hi there, my name is Colin Kleine, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to scale a technology company by applying my 4-step formula. I've been working with technology companies for the past 14 years. I've worked with around 170 SaaS companies that have been expanding globally, 41 of which have gone to hit unicorn status, and that includes the likes of Deal, Twilio, Wix, Datadog. Being heavily inspired by the companies that I've worked with, I've studied both their go-to-market as well as the people that they bring in. And ultimately what it taught me is that when it comes to succeeding as a company, helping to scale, helping to enter new markets, helping to achieve profitability, it comes down to 2 parts. Implement the right go-to-market, and then hire the people that know how to reverse engineer the implementation of that go-to-market. So that's how we as a company combine go-to-market with recruitment to help companies scale. We expanded into 5 markets ourselves, completely bootstrapped. Shortly that's going to be 7. So the lessons that I've learned from the businesses that I work with, I've applied it in my own business. And what I'm going to teach you are the 4 most crucial parts of scaling a company that you can apply to help you achieve success. So let's smash it. When it comes to scaling a company, it boils down to 4 parts. Number 1, appoint the right board advisors. Number 2, bring in the right channel partners, the right partnerships. Number 3, hire what I call expansion managers. And number 4, have the right recruitment strategy. This isn't something which has been applicable today. This is something which has actually been applicable right throughout all of antiquity. So to illustrate the points, I'm going to take you back thousands of years of human history and tell you about how Alexander the Great implemented these 4 principles. And here is how. The first case in point, surround yourself by people who are more talented, more smart than you. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room. And luckily for Alexander, he happened to be in the room with Aristotle. He became his mentor from a young age. He taught him logic, critical thinking, and of course the stories of leadership and heroism which went back thousands of years of all their Greek ancestors, of the various trials and tribulations, how they did it, what made them successful, and how Alexander could implement it within his own life. By having the right mentor that was able to impart that knowledge, it not only shaped his worldview, it shaped the rest of human history. And that's the importance of having the right advisors around you. The next one is partnerships. Alexander conquered much of the known world, but he wasn't able to do that by just directly invading. He was able to do that by applying the knowledge and wisdom that he learned, by being able to also appoint the right allies, the right partners that were brought in and motivated to his cause. Another partnership was with the famous and the fearless Bactrian people. And how did he achieve it? Through his marriage to Roxana, the princess of the Bactrian people. Through that marriage, he was able to win their loyalty, devotion, and by showing his commitment to their cultures, their norms, and customs, he created an incredible ally and partner that led to many military successes. Part 3, and in some sense part 4, is what I call an expansion manager. Now, what an expansion manager is not, it's not someone who's very, very senior and experienced. It's someone who has the relevant experience. They might have, let's just say, 4 or 5 years of that experience, but they're young, they're motivated, they're extremely hungry, and for them to achieve success, it's something that would torpedo their life or career by 10, 20, even 100 years. It's someone used in business. Alexander the Great used it by having some incredible generals such as Hephaestion, which came from the Thessalian League, which he also brought on as a partnership, that were masters when it came to cavalry. Hephaestion was one of the crucial elements in helping Alexander the Great to defeat the Persian Empire in the Battle of Gaugamela through his brilliance, his wizardry, his skill in cavalry, and that's what led to one of the greatest military achievements of all mankind. The same thing of Ptolemy. Young, motivated, hungry soldier turned general that would then go on to rule Egypt and then turn and inspire the Ptolemaic Empire. And that's the value of working with people who are young and hungry, that are believing in your vision, where by helping to execute that vision, it's going to advance their own career by about 10, 20, 100 years. That's how you can work with expansion managers. So let's now deep dive into how you apply this within business. And the first one is board advisors. Now, I just wanted to share that a board advisor is something that you can leverage in your business at any stage. If you don't believe me, then let me tell you about the story of Steve Jobs and Mike Markula. When Steve Jobs was a young, very out there inventor with some brilliant ideas, it's through the mentorship and leadership of a former Intel executive who initially invested into his ideas and was able to help him to run strategy, to run marketing, and to run operations. That's what led Steve Jobs to securing the first big round of venture capital, which then kicked off the empire of Apple. So the first thing, let's talk about the difference between a board advisor and a board member. The difference is a board advisor is someone who can be a mentor to you. It's someone who can be an investor in the company, but they don't exclusively have to be. Whereas a board member is somebody that now has a fiduciary duty to the business. My recommendation is to start with someone as an advisor first. Once you're happy with how everything's going, then allow them to become a board member. The next one is, why do I think that startups need board advisors? The fact of the matter is, when you surround yourself by people who have been there and done that, it allows you to be successful significantly faster. Let me tell you what I mean. If you're a seed stage company in, let's say, marketing technology, there are a lot of risks that you're going to face and challenges as a business. But let's say that you're able to bring on the vice president of Asia Pacific or the chief revenue officer from a company such as an Adobe or a Marketo or a Pardot, a hyper successful MarTech company, where this person has seen how the company scaled, how they did their go-to-market, how they ran their sales organization, and they've also got hundreds of millions of dollars of their own networks and contacts that they can help open up for you. Do you think that'll make it easier for you to be successful? My other case in point is early stage founders are typically looking for capital. What if you have a board advisor who comes from a late stage fund, a fund that's now deploying 50 million, 100 million and beyond? The fact is, this person knows how to look at the numbers of a company and tell you the story that it's saying. They know also how to tell you to tweak the metrics so you can go from seed to Series A to then Series B, where the metrics again change, and then beyond. And through their own contacts and networks, because they are highly networked with the earlier stage investors, they can also help to open up a lot of doors and pathways for you. So whilst I'm a very big fan of having a diversity of skill sets on the board, I like to see a founder who started, scaled, and exited for $1 billion. Why? Because they can be a sparring partner. I like to see a proven go-to-market revenue leader who's worked in a similar category of technology. So whether you're HR tech, cybersecurity, MarTech, who's been there and done that, can tell you how to do the go-to-market, can introduce major strategic deals for you in new regions, can coach you how to be able to upsell and cross-sell, someone who can significantly shorten the time frame it takes for you to get from here to here, as well as some of the other crucial and key hires. An expert in operations, an expert on the financials, in the case of a latter stage VC before, as well as strategy, marketing. You don't want to have too big of an advisory board because it's the quality that matters. So to summarize my board advisory strategy, the first one, dream big, very, very big. Don't think of the company you are today. Think of what you would ideally love to become. There's nothing that's too audacious. If you want to get a $1 billion exit, then guess what? Surround yourself with the advisors that have had a $1 billion exit, and it's going to significantly increase your chances. Number two, make sure that you have a diversity of skill sets. Founders can think that they can do everything themselves. I'm 100% guilty of this. But the fact is, your superpower may be in operations, then surround yourself by people that are expert in go-to-market, finance, or strategy. And the last one, when you have a board advisor, you want to make sure that they're also going to be hungry and motivated. For me, I personally believe in structuring the compensation in such a way that they're hungry and motivated. For me, I like the formula of low cash retainer plus advisory equity, plus if they help you to achieve some type of outcome, whether it's raising a significant amount of venture capital or landing a game-changing enterprise deal, that they can receive a clip or a percentage fee of that venture capital, or let's say lifetime recurring revenue on that deal. You want to structure it in such a way that they're going to be motivated and hungry to also want to give back. I'm going to define partnerships as companies who sell to the exact same target customer base as what you do from a 100% complementary angle. It could be another technology company. It could be a consulting firm. It could even just be a referral or affiliate partner. One way or another, if you can identify a particular pain point that they have that you can help with, so say, for example, you're a company from Australia and they're a company in Singapore. They don't have customers in Australia. You don't have customers in Singapore. But you both target the exact same customer base from a completely complementary angle. By becoming partners, announcing a partnership with one another helps the other party to get brand awareness and traction in the other market. By sending each other deal flow and referrals, and one of those deals pays off, both of you grow your valuation, both of you have now generated revenue in a new region, and you've done this on a 100% no money down deal. The trick is to identify the companies that sell to that same customer base complementary angle and crafting it as a win-win-win. If you can craft a win-win-win, and you can do that, the formula that we've learned is 8 to 10 times when you're going into a new market, you're now going to unleash a significant amount of inbound deal flow. And that's how you leverage the channel partner strategy. So here are some fun facts about a channel-led go-to-market. Only 10% of tech startups use a channel-driven go-to-market, but 70% of unicorns and Fortune 500 technology companies use a channel-driven go-to-market. It's probably saying something. Here's something else to consider. Investors love a channel-driven go-to-market. Why? Because it shows capital efficiency. Through announcing partnerships, you gain free PR. Through establishing partnerships, you can get a foothold in a new market without needing to deploy large amounts of capital. It's capital efficient. Second of all, if you are relying on founder-led sales or direct sales only, it becomes harder to scale. Whereas if you can identify partners in new sectors, in new markets that can take you into new geographies or open up new customers for you, it means that you are now a scalable business that now has an ecosystem that allows it to be able to grow and scale even further. Investors love to be able to see it. Some other things to consider. You can try to sell to one customer and you'll get one customer. Or you can sell to one partner and you can access 100 customers. And furthermore, partners also end up becoming customers. That's why I recommend a channel-driven go-to-market. The third part, expansion managers. So let me just re-emphasize, what an expansion manager is not, what I call the kiss of death for a tech company is, let's say you're looking to launch into a new market. Let's say you want to launch into Singapore and you're a US company. What the vast majority of companies do is they will bring on a senior enterprise sales executive who is likely managing a team of about 20 to 30. They come across with this amazing Rolodex. You're all excited because of the value of their networks and contacts, as well as the fact that they've been leading another business. You spend a lot of money to bring this person on board. They come to you and they ask, I need to get more hires, I need to get more marketing, I need to get more sales support, I need to get SDR support. And you believe them because you've seen the track record that they've had. So you keep going for a year, 2 years, until your investors start getting impatient on why are we burning so much cash? You have just made what I consider to be the kiss of death, because you brought somebody on at a very, very high salary. They were previously managing a team of 20 or 30. Managing a team of 20 or 30 is very, very different to a person who's prepared to roll up their sleeves and do whatever it takes and being the first person on ground. The person that can take you from 0 to 5 is very, very different as a skill set to the person that can go from 6 to 20. On top of that, there's been countless times where you hire someone for their networks. Guess what? It doesn't mean that they're going to use their networks. Networks don't mean anything unless there's the desire, drive, and motivation to use them. So the key point that I want to emphasize is hiring for young, hungry, motivated will beat the experience and the networks. And this is how you apply it. I'm very excited today to be sharing an audience with one of the coolest and most interesting dudes in the world of venture capital. A man who has got, I think, probably one of the most interesting backstories. The guy even has his own private plane because he's an absolute boss. And also, I love the way that he's thought about the world of venture capital and his fund. So for those of you who don't know who the second Australian Ung Mo is on the webinar, Mr. Birrell, would you like to introduce yourself?
Why, thanks, Colin. Yes, great to be here today. We're chatting with you. It's a great pleasure.
Welcome. Chris, I personally think that you're one of the most interesting people in the world of venture capital. One, because of your backstory and how you fell into it. It's very, very, very different to the vast majority of other funds. Two, because of your, I suppose, just the way that you view it and even the specialization of the fund. So before we get into what Func Ventures does, can you give people a little bit about your backstory and how you fell into doing what you're doing?
Like most young engineers back in the day, I was a programmer. So I did a lot of programming in the early part of my career. And then about 30 years ago, I got asked to move to Hong Kong by an organization called the Hong Kong Jockey Club. Very large IT company, and they hired me for my programming expertise. But because the project was actually in a little bit of trouble, they asked me to help manage the project. And then during that journey, I met a gentleman who would become my mentor in future years and was able to join a startup called Dascom. I opened their Hong Kong office. And then shortly after that, in about 1998, they opened, or they had an opening in the US, and they asked me to join in the US and join their team. And I went through a couple of years with them in the US, and we got acquired by IBM just a bit around the beginning of the year 2000. That was my first taste of working in a small company, seeing what it was like to build a product, and traveled all around the US, installed it, and had to get customers to use it. And then my final kind of corporate job, I was the CIO at Blue Coat, which we grew from 400 million to 800 million revenue, or nearly $1 billion actually. Sold that to Symantec for 4.65 billion. And the pattern here is that each company I worked for got bigger and bigger and bigger. But it actually became less innovative, frankly. The innovation was happening through, as the companies got bigger, through M&A activity of startups. So I was involved in the M&A process and got to meet a lot of young startups and founders and watch them help grow our companies along with the rest of the incumbent revenue that we had. But I really wanted to get back to that energy of innovation. So I started angel investing in about 2019, invested in a few companies. Some of them were successful, some of them weren't. And I really learned a lot about, what's the current crop of entrepreneurs like. And it really opened my eyes to the sort of next generation of entrepreneurs. I also, at the time, was approached by a company called the Founder Institute, and I was already a mentor of theirs, and they were running a new program in Palo Alto called VC Lab. And what VC Lab is it's basically an incubator for venture capitalists. So I'd done a bit of angel investing, and I realized that the good and the bad thing about angel investing, the good thing is you get involved with young companies and get to be on the front line. The bad thing is you're kind of putting your eggs in one basket. So you're actually backing a founder and you feel married to them almost in a way, and you don't really have a lot of diversification. So moving into setting up a fund was really my answer to wanting to stay in that role as a mentor to these guys, but also diversifying my risk across multiple companies. So that's when I decided to set up the fund, just going back about 18 months now.
I love it. I mean, you went from cutting code to cutting checks, and there's a reason they call you Chris, the exit king Birrell. You're all about that. So you've now got Func Ventures, and I think for me, why I consider you to be one of the most interesting VCs that I've ever met is because your background is so different to any other VC that I've met. Taking it then back to Func Ventures, because you didn't just start a fund. You started a fund with a very, very, very particular thematic, which is APIs. Why?
I've been lucky enough in my career to go through quite a few technology changes, from the PC revolution to the beginning of networked computing, client server computing, internet, mobile, cloud. So I've kind of seen all the different waves. Now we're heading into sort of the era of AI. What I've always been kind of fascinated with even when I was a young programmer was the concept of modularization and putting building blocks together and then reusing them, reusability. The name Func Ventures comes from the word function, which is the smallest unit of code that we reuse. So I've always been fascinated with that, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that as a young engineer, I soon realized that I didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and rather than write something from scratch, if there was a class library or some other API available to use it, I wanted to use it because it saved time, and quite often it was more scalable and cost effective in any case. So I noticed there was no fund specializing in this area. There's a lot of funds specialize in B2B SaaS. But what I like about APIs is that I see them as actually interesting business models. Fundamentally, that's what I like about them. So I like the fact that you can create an API, you can then charge for its use. And I'll give you a couple of really good examples. There's a company called Twilio, which most people probably have heard of. It's a US listed company. It was started by a gentleman by the name of Jeff Lawson, who used to work for AWS. And what he noticed that inside of AWS, when they build all these separate offerings inside AWS, they actually separate the team into these little chunks of around 10 people, perhaps a little more. And then they actually don't talk to each other. They create API specs, and that's how they communicate. And he wrote a book about it. It's called Ask Your Developer. And I found that fascinating. So he noticed that getting programmers to write code that interface to telcos, whether that be for call centers or for SMSing or whatever, was not really easy. So he created a whole API library that you can use for SMSing, for setting up your own customized call centers, etc. So I was really fascinated with that approach, and there's been many others to follow. So I really thought that, are there entrepreneurs out here in Asia Pacific that have that mindset as well? And what I like about that mindset is the usage model. So that, as a user, you can log into the website of Twilio, you can swipe your credit card, you can start using it straight away. You can write some test code, send some SMS messages. And then as your business grows, as your own product grows, you start using that. And the APIs that you use in Twilio actually become part of your product. So from Twilio's point of view, they're giving you a foot in the door at a fairly low entry point to make the product work. But then at the same time, they're also making it sticky, because as a user of Twilio, I'm not going to go and rip and replace it. It's working. I'm happy with it. And as my business grows, they get a more of a cut of my revenue. So it's sticky. And then as more and more programmers hear about Twilio, there's kind of this network effect where other programmers start using it. They post their code on Stack Overflow. Quite a fascinating business model. And then if you look at AI, you look at the way AI is now being used as in copilots to write a lot of the code, particularly for user interface and voice interfaces and so forth. The APIs still need to be there, and the AI code will call it. So I really see that the API code as playing a prominent role in the era of AI as well. So lots of positive reasons why I set up the API fund.
I obviously agree because I'm a part of it as well. I think for me, what makes APIs particularly interesting, and I've never even thought about APIs until I had met you. I mean, yes, I know MuleSoft, I know Boomi, I know Akana, Apogee. What I've found particularly interesting about the entire thesis of investing in APIs is when it comes to a late stage tech company or even a publicly listed tech company, the metrics that they get assessed by are things such as scalability, network effect, ecosystems, stickiness, which APIs kind of meet all of them, because the fact is you're not the actual application, you're the layer underneath it that connects a whole bunch of other applications. It's something that it's quite scalable. You can partner with a significant amount of companies. It creates that network effect and allows it to be able to go viral. That's another thing. I find API companies can generate virality and stickiness as well, because it's hard to take it out. Like in certain cases, you can switch off a SaaS product, but when you've got something which is effectively deeply embedded, ingrained in enterprise business applications, it becomes then quite difficult to switch off. So I guess that's for me what's always made API companies particularly interesting. Then I suppose going back to your fund and going back to the fact that you're probably one of the most unique fund managers that I know. For people who are interested in how does a fund manager actually make decisions, how do you vet companies? Like, let's say of all the presentations that you've seen, what is it that makes a company really attractive when they're presenting? Like, what is it that will lead you to want to deploy capital into a business?
This is the $64,000 or $64 million question, I should say. Yes. So there's fundamentally three things that we do as VCs. They call it the three S's. We source deals, we then select the deals we want to invest in, and then we help them with certain services. And I would say the second S, the selection of what we invest in, is definitely the most important. That obviously drives then the future of the returns of the fund. Now, when I started out investing, I was obviously leveraging a lot of my experience in having seen many startups over the last 30 years and doing all those M&As, etc. So you kind of already have some heuristics in terms of, you immediately get your ears kind of prick up when you hear a company that's interesting, that's going to have some new idea that you think may have some legs. But as a fund manager, I've now become a little bit more process driven and come up with a framework that I use that's based off of my experience, a lot of things that I've learned from listening to other fund managers, looking at successful funds, and also making it a little bit specific to the region. So I came up with this framework. It's called the Superior Framework, and I'll briefly talk about a couple of the important parts of it. So each letter in the word superior stands for a particular attribute that I look at in the company. Now, I don't just look at the company. It's a matrix. I look at the founder, the market, the traction, and some intangibles as well. So that first S stands for solving difficult problem. So the API has to solve something that actually is hard, and they have to do it in a way that's scalable and cost effective. So when you think about something like Stripe, which is a payments API, they can process payment in any currency across the world now today, and they can do treasury functions. They can do payments from suppliers and buyers. So it's a whole ecosystem, but it's a very clever API. It's easy to use. So it really does solve a difficult problem from that perspective. The U stands for uncovering unique solutions. Now, what I mean by that is that how are the customers using that API? Now, if you look at the early days of the mobile phone, when Uber first came out, now Uber was a very novel application, but it would never have existed without Google Maps API, Stripe API, and Twilio API. So you have to look at what are the customers using it, what unique solutions are they uncovering. The P stands for pathways to profitability. So you really need to understand how they're going to grow the business to be a sizable business where, we're looking for companies that have valuations, above, we want them to exit with valuations of above 100 million up, over the billion mark. And then the E stands for ecosystems. The R stands for regional factors, I for impact, O for ownership, and the second R for regulatory issues. So it's a whole framework that I use.
Can I jump in and just ask about some of the decision making in that? So, for example, if an early stage founder comes to you and they present their proposition, how would they present the case on what their pathway to profitability is? And can you give some examples? Like when a founder's come to see you, I've got this amazing idea. It's going to have a $12 trillion market cap and all of that. How do they demonstrate to you that they've got a pathway to profitability? And I guess, what are the questions that you ask? What is it that you look for?
Yeah, a lot of founders, particularly inexperienced ones, really overestimate their TAM. They come up with some ridiculous numbers, frankly, that make
I've
me
heard
cringe.
13 trillion, yeah.
Fundamentally, the way that a VC invests at each round that we invest in is like a go-to-market experiment. So, in the seed round, we want to get to a certain, revenue number. We want to get a certain number of customers, and particular, maybe a certain number of customer features. So each round has its own targets. But to believe in the long run of the story, you've got to also believe in that there is a big market. Now, sometimes you can't really quantify it. But you just know by either gut feeling or by maybe that they're launching a product in APAC that had previously been launched in the US, but there's some challenges why the US company hadn't made it work correctly in Asia, so they have a regional play. I'll give you a really good example. There's a company based out of Singapore called Asia Verify, and they allow through an API a company to query just by putting in a company number. Who are the directors? Who are the UBOs? And is there any AML flags or other information about the company that would have a cause for concern? So there's US companies that do this kind of thing, like Dun & Bradstreet and so forth, but they don't have the native information. They buy it from third parties. So they've gone to the trouble of scanning over 100 million documents in Asia, translating them to English using certain AI technology, and being able to process that in an English language API that can be used then across a suite of use cases in the compliance industry. So, and obviously that's a huge market. So when I invest in that company, fairly early stage, we really wanted to make sure we're getting some traction. And now they're going through the next raise. They're now expanding their market. They're tackling Europe as a big market for them, and it's another experiment and go to market. So I treat it as a step-by-step process, but you've got to have confidence that the overall market's going to be big enough to create that big exit.
Yeah. So you spoke about, number one, it's the product itself. Number two, I like the fact that you look at validation, such as, has this gotten traction in other markets? I guess what comes after that? Like, from your experience, they've got a good product, they're now getting traction in new markets. What happens after that? What does a company need to do to become hyper successful? Like, what are some of the steps and measures that they need to take? And also, what are some of the biggest mistakes that companies make? Because you and I have seen some absolute horror stories and some of the most idiotic decisions. I suppose, what are good decisions and what are the things that a company needs to do to then go on to become successful?
The smart founders that I work with are really focused on when they grow regionally to put the right people in the right places. So they want to make sure they have the right team motivated and incented in the right way to help grow their business. Because you can be a company out of Singapore and think you're doing quite well, but if you want to tackle the UK market, it's very difficult just to parachute somebody into London or just hire somebody who's an unknown from a recruiter and not understand how they would work in your industry and how that's going to be successful. There's a lot of mistakes made in this particular area, but the ones that get it right, they really it's basically one of the probably the 2 or 3 critical success factors is getting the right team. The second one is as you grow your customer base, is you've really got to have that, that you've got to have that vision, you've got to have that dynamism in your team to really exceed expectations in your product. Your product can't be just 2 times better. It needs to be 10 times better. I mean, you can't be creating a better tire for the car. You got to be creating a better, whole experience for the people that change the tires and market the tires, and the whole experience has to be so much better. And then probably the third thing is just growing the company at the right pace. Don't try to boil the ocean. Like, I see all these companies have international expansion opportunities, and they think, US is a big market. Let's go tackle the US. Well, easier said than done. It's much better that you first of all, dip your toe in the water, find a good go-to-market partner. Maybe you don't even hire anyone, and you start to tackle maybe 1 or 2 customers in a particular market. So yeah, lots of lessons that I've seen over the years, but yeah, many things we could talk about.
I'll tell you something else that I find particularly interesting about your background is you've spoken there about go-to-market and recruitment, which is very unique in the sense that you're potentially one of the only VCs that talks about that. Do you think that the reason that you've got that particular disposition is because you haven't come up through the traditional VC line, Deloitte investment bank, because you've come up through actually working in tech companies that then went on to have a major exit? Do you think that that's influenced a large portion of the way that you actually run the fund and make investment decisions around investment?
I've not really thought about it in that way before, Colin, but I in a sense, I think, as an experienced, what the traditional fund managers would call me an experienced operator. That's what they call us. I would just call it like, I've just been inside those companies before, and I've seen what team members need to do. You need to do extraordinary things. You don't make the next, 100+ million company by being just okay. You might make a nice little lifestyle business, but you've got to have extraordinary people. So yeah, I mean, I was living that. I was part of that over many different iterations of different types of companies, and I worked with some phenomenal people. And it didn't happen by accident. The people that the good people recruit good people as well. So yeah, basically through my knowledge and experience over the years, I would say that just comes naturally that you need a good team.
Yep. And then I suppose a couple of final questions is, give some advice to founders. So if a founder is currently trying to raise capital, let us peer inside the brilliant mind of Mr. Chris Birrell. What advice can you give to them that'll increase their chances of securing capital?
I think it goes back to that solving difficult problem, in my opinion. So make sure you're doing something that's really hard, that you have some data points on how the customers are going to use it, and don't put every feature in the product. Like I said, be very narrow and deep is much better. Don't overestimate your TAM. Be realistic. Make sure you surround yourself with good people. Always listen and be open to learning. I think it's important. And the other thing is that it's a bit of a misnomer, or a fallacy that every founder looks like Mark Zuckerberg with a hoodie and just dropped out of Harvard. It's not like that at all. Most founders I work with are been through multiple companies. Some of them failed, some of them were successful. They have great experience. So if you're one of those guys who's like trapped in that corporate culture and you've had this burning idea, maybe it's time. Maybe you could look and join one of the accelerator or incubator programs around and get started. But yeah,
nice. And lastly, if I also want to get myself a private jet and be flying into Scalerr to do meetings in Singapore, what are the steps that you can? What are some career advice that you can provide for how people can, I guess, achieve some of the level of success that you've achieved in your career? If you were to go back and speak to a younger version of yourself out there, cutting code, hitting the nightclubs in Lang Kwai Fong, being Australia's #1 Guai Lo, looking forward to growing their career in the world of tech, what's some advice that you would have provided to a younger version of yourself on how to become successful?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a different world we live in today. I think that there's one video that I watched from Jack Ma actually that really has stuck with me, and I think it's actually pretty good advice. And he talks about what you should, what your career trajectory could possibly look like. And what he said is that when you're in your 20s, go work for a good boss. And when you're in your 30s, that's when you either start your own company or you work for a startup. When you're in your 40s is when you should be making money, like just making lots of money. And then when you're in your 50s, invest in the young people. So I think it's actually quite sage advice. I remember I met Jack Ma when I lived in Hong Kong, maybe 2000 or 1999. I can't remember exactly which year it was. And Alibaba was probably what I classified as a failing startup. Funny, I have some friends that had stock in it in those days that sold it because they needed to, go on a holiday or something. But, you got to look at the opportunity you have in your life right now, what the environment looks like. And there's plenty of opportunities, actually. I think we live in a very exciting time. I think there's very many great problems we need to solve in this world, whether it be things like climate change, whether it be things like AI. I mean, there's so many great fields to work in these days.
What do you think that Australian startups can learn from Southeast Asian startups? And what do you think that Southeast Asian startups can learn from Australian startups?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I'm a great guy.
Think about it, first of all. You are. Think about it from a perspective of what can a Southeast Asian startup learn from an Australian startup. I would say that the Australian startups have now cracked the code on globalization. So if you look at Atlassian, Afterpay, Canva, and GoOne, there's many others coming now. Frankie One out of Melbourne. These companies have figured out how to go global. So I'd say that's probably the biggest lesson. Figure out how did they do that? How did they become such global brands? And then the other way around, what can Australian startups learn from Southeast Asian startups? I would say it's probably more around the approach to getting the job done in terms of hiring the right people and doing it more cost effectively. So I think Southeast Asian startups are very frugal. They know how to do micro offshoring and how to manage it well and how to keep their burn down. So I'd say that would be a lesson that Australian companies can learn from Southeast Asian companies.
Yeah, I'd say that I strongly agree with that. I find that Southeast Asian companies are a lot more capital efficient. I also find that they're a lot more process oriented, which is something that, look, if you want to grow and scale a company, you need to get processes. I mean, I definitely know that even with Media Shock, where I'm sitting today, I can drive them insane. Being Australians are very, very unstructured, whereas I know that Singapore businesses are quite structured, business processes are quite structured. But I agree. I definitely agree with what you're saying. Australian businesses, they do think global, but I also think it's because it's so far away from everywhere else that you may as well go think global. Whereas capital efficiency is something that I find businesses are absolutely world-class at. And I suppose to cap things off, and as a last question, what do you envisage the future of the fund being? So what are the next steps for Chris Birrell? Tell us about some of the juicy goss, Chris.
I mean, I have ambitions of my own, but I think the fundamentally is to just help these companies that I invest in grow, to find more API first companies in APAC, and just keep growing the fund as it's going. It's going quite well, and keep going as we are.
Sounds good. Well, Chris, thank you for joining us. I'm still looking forward to you picking me up in the private airplane and taking me on a spin. But hey, one could only dream. Until then, I really appreciate your time, big man.
Thank you, Colin. Appreciate it.
Wow, what a wonderful session you had with Chris. Huh? I love his story of how Chris went full circle, right? From displaying gratitude to his mentors who brought him from when he's young and programmer, and now being a mentor to many of the startup founders that he is with right now. So some of the key points that I took away from Chris, that's my point of view, that most innovations happens with startups. So if you are a startup out there, you're doing such an important job, right? You're literally the group who makes things happen, and all the big boys do is buy you over, right? And that Chris has a superior framework, right? He named it superior. I think it's brilliantly superior as well, right? Solving difficult problems, uncovering unique solutions, pathway to profitability, having the ecosystem regional. Obviously, they want to invest in people who can scale and having that impact, and the ownership and some regulatory side of things, right? So I know of a few of you in the room today and who are in the exact API space. So do watch Chris' segments again and again. I'm sure it will be worth at least a few $1 million, if not tens or hundreds of millions, right? So, and another point that I took away from your session and Chris' session is team members are so important. They are the right investment to grow your business in a new market, especially in APAC. And having the right team member, Colin, you were also earlier sharing with us, junior enough to be hungry and affordable enough, but also experienced enough to have that similar battle that you're looking to succeed in. So these are my few learning points from the very valuable stuff yourself and Chris have been sharing.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, completely agree on hungry. I haven't eaten for 6 hours. And I just love how you've got a bogan from Australia that now owns a private jet. I love the entire backstory. And look, what I find really interesting is just how unconventional it actually is, and the fact that the guy had worked for companies that achieved multiple exits, and then he saw, what is it that a company needs to do to achieve an exit? So I'm going to deploy capital, but because I've seen that entire growth journey, I can then advise the companies on what is it they need to do. So no, he's a really interesting guy. I also quite like the framework as well. He probably came up with that over a few beers, but hey, it sounds quite smart.
So for those of you who are on the right call right now, we'd like to invite you to leave some of your questions. Just click on the Q&A button. We'll be addressing them in this session. We've gotten quite a few of them already lined up. So maybe we can get on to our first question. Let me see what the first question is. It's from, is it a lady or a guy? I'm sorry. Ela Thompson, right? So given the increasing complexities of global markets, what are the top 3 challenges startups face when expanding in ASEAN? You got some thoughts?
Yeah. The first one is go-to-market. Southeast Asia is an incredibly complex, weird, wonderful, and interesting region. The countries in Southeast Asia, most of them don't speak the same language, and the markets are very different. Like Indonesia has nothing in common with Singapore outside of you can get salted egg, and you really need to try salted egg. So just knowing how to do the local cultures and customs between, say, a Thailand to a Singapore to an Indonesia, and even in Singapore, you've got all the global companies, then you've got all the local companies. So the difference in language and culture is something to be aware of. The second one is just knowing the team that you need to build. I've seen a lot of businesses that have been quite successful in overseas markets. They come into Asia Pacific and they absolutely balls it up, and it just comes down to hiring the wrong people. It's hiring what I would like to aptly describe as overpriced Muppets, or hiring people who are just not prepared to be hands-on, to do the grunt work. You are launching a startup in a new region. You need to be prepared to roll up your sleeves, and you also need to know and understand what it is that you're doing. I'd say that they would be the 2 primary ones, and then to then plug Media Shock, you need to get brand awareness. People actually need to know who you are, what it is that you do, in a really, really simplified message. So if you can convey the message tailored to the local audience, you might need to also change around some of the language as well. You don't hire overpriced Muppets, and you actually also tailor the go-to market. That's how you can overcome it. That's what I think the 3 biggest challenges are.
Okay, yeah, thank you for sharing. The next question has come in. Right, how would startups balance resource allocation between their domestic market, where they are probably doing a brilliant job, and international expansion? What are your thoughts?
So this is something that I'm quite passionate about, because for those of you who haven't noticed, I'm not actually from Singapore. Spoiler alert there. In terms of balancing resource allocation, my take on it is this. If you are early stage, focus on your continent. Because focus on your continent before you start focusing on other continents. Because let's just say I'm from Australia. Most of the global technology companies have their HQ in Asia Pacific, based in Singapore. So if I'm transacting and dealing with global businesses that are based in Australia, chances are they're going to have a HQ in Singapore. That means that it's interconnected. It's the same thing if you're based in Europe and you're doing deals with companies in the Nordics. Chances are they're going to have their EMEA headquarter in either Dublin, in Estonia, or in London. So you're working with companies that already have decision makers in a different country, but at least it's in the same continent. That's how you can control cost. Whereas if you go for the moonshot of, I'm going to go straight to Europe, or I'm going to go straight to the US, that's where you can start burning a lot of cash and you can't necessarily control it. So the other thing is, a lot of the same partners that you would work with in Australia, Singapore, whatever market in the same continent, they're going to appear in the same countries. So a partnership that you sign in, let's say, the Nordics, chances are they'll have an office in the UK. So you can basically leverage those partnerships to help you get traction. So that way you're not burning a lot of cash, you're capital efficient, and you're getting traction in multiple markets, and again, in the same continent, as you heard me say. That's how I would do it.
Yeah, and the next question, it sounds that this person actually knows you personally, Lachlan, right? She is asking, what's your perspective on the role of government support? I know you've got something with all the governments in the world, especially the Singapore government, right? So what's your perspective on the role of government supports in global expansions? Right?
Yeah, so government support, it's very important, but it's important for a number of different reasons. Lachlan. I think I know what their real name is. But basically, if you're partnering with government, it's a statement of endorsement, it's a statement of authority. And let me give you an example. The selling style in Australia is different to the selling style in Singapore. In Australia, we buy off reciprocity. In Singapore, people buy from social proof. They want to see that it's true. I know what you're like with your Instagram shopping habits. Basically, they want to see that it's been endorsed by another company in the region or something else which is notable or really recognizable. So if you're partnering with a government entity, that really gives that symbol and the tick of approval that causes other entities to trust it. Plus, with the government programs that are run, so let's just say in Singapore, you've got international delegations that are coming in that show you around the local ecosystem, local startup ecosystem, various co-working spaces, who are the experts in this space, who are some of the VPs of APAC that have scaled unicorns here. The government actually helps to facilitate a lot of that. So when you come in, you get to see the entire full spectrum program. They can help you with introductions. They can help you in events. I strongly recommend to just make your life easy, work with the government. And if you're hearing this Singapore government, yes, I am looking for a PR. So thank you.
Right.
What are your thoughts?
And the thing about governments, right, they are interested in two things. One is to help their local companies succeed elsewhere.
Yeah.
And also to attract foreign companies to come into the local company. I mean the country itself. At least that's the way the Singapore government thinks.
Yep.
Like. They could be from, their KPIs are very important. Yep. So if you help them and identify and help them with their KPIs, everybody wins.
Yep.
Right? So understand what is there for, what you're in for, and everybody wins.
Yep, absolutely. And that's also what we found as well. When you're working with the trade bodies, I'm going to let you in on a secret. They have KPIs. Trade bodies want to make sure that their companies are getting into global markets and that there's global companies coming into your market. So as long as you can help them in achieving that, the government's going to be one of your biggest supporters. And if you've got the government supporting you, well then, look, it's worked wonders for my business. So very, very grateful for it. The next question comes to us from Maria, and that is how to target conservative countries. So she has a social impact startup targeting neurodivergent adults that live a pretty normal life. Currently pivoted to launch to only focusing on countries where the issue is already seen as an issue by the government. This is a very, very interesting comment. This is a very, very interesting one. I'll discuss this with you. So when I typically think of neurodivergency, I think of ADHD. What is the other one? It'll come to me. But basically, there's different forms of neurodivergency. Now, in Australia, there's a lot more awareness of it. There's a lot of funding that goes into autism. That's what I was thinking of. There's a lot of funding that goes into these programs, but also there's been a lot of adoption of hiring programs on how do you tailor it to the person's individual strengths. So, for example, if someone is autistic, chances are they have a superpower in that they can analyze patterns and detect patterns better than someone else can. If someone has ADHD, I have ADHD, and it means that you are very spontaneous and you can also drive your wife insane. So you basically play it to, as well as the organizers of this webinar. So there's a lot of awareness of that and how to tailor it to their strengths. In terms of targeting conservative countries, I'm probably going to pass this one over to Ming Song, because let's just say if you wanted to target Indonesia, if you wanted to target Malaysia, or maybe even Singapore is more conservative and it's less of an awareness around this than in Australia. What are your thoughts?
I think we have to see this as a social enterprise or social impact startups. What's the goal? If the goal is to bring awareness of this thing, partnering enterprises, partnering governments, where they can help you bring more awareness is probably what you're looking at. And it's not really down to dollars and cents. You want to help the enterprises show their good side of things. You can probably encourage the enterprise to have team building activities around some of these things, having awareness of the other kind of people around the society. I think you can achieve your goal as well. So understanding your goal clearly, that your goal here may not necessarily be to make shitloads and have a private plane at the end of the day. And having that clarity makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Right. So if the goal is really to help these people wholeheartedly, rarely the people who are interested in that. And as long as you fulfill your own objective and goal, I really respect Maria for doing this. This is really the road less traveled, and it's definitely not easy, but I've seen people who have gone at a certain stage of life and they think that this is something they believe passionately.
Can I actually, I thought of a really, really good example. So just as a plug, one of my friends, Luke Ricks, back in Australia, a very successful founder, he started a company called With You, With Me. I'm probably going to butcher it, so don't yell at me, Luke, if you're watching this. But it was helping Army veterans to then move into the workforce. But one of the things that they did is they would do an assessment, and if someone had, like, let's just say if someone was autistic or if someone had ADHD, they would know that means that they've got particular strengths in certain areas, so that when the people that were coming out of the program were going into the workforce, they were able to clearly demonstrate that if you actually have someone who's neurodivergent, focused on a particular task where there's a pattern recognition where people with that neurodivergency are extremely strong, he was able to show that how playing people to their individual strengths, how it significantly enhanced profitability, how it significantly led to enhanced business outcomes. So I think where there's less awareness of it, it's demonstrating how neurodivergency, when played to their individual strengths, how they can actually outperform other segments of the population. Tie it back to business outcomes. That's probably what I would say.
And I do have a few colleagues, particularly one of them was saying that he's a little bit on the spectrum,
Yep.
but he's brilliantly creative.
Yeah.
So like what you said, tying back and making sure you play to their strengths.
Yeah. And then we have Anonymous. I'm guessing that's their first name. And what is the toughest part about entering the Singapore market from a Singaporean perspective? Oh, that's interesting. Maybe we should hear the Singaporean.
Honestly, Singapore is the easiest country to start a business. I'm sure from the point of view, from the point that you have an idea to registering a business legally, it probably takes hours for a local. It probably takes at most 2 weeks. I remember having to register a company in China that took more than 2 months. Yeah, so
Jesus.
Entering the Singapore market is actually very, very simple. To excel in it, that's another whole story, right? Because this is a fairly expensive city. To excel in it, you probably got to be fairly clear about what's your service or your product offering, and be very focused. Instead of doing everything, just focus on one or two things that you are really differentiating yourself out there.
Yep. I'd say getting a bank account and then digesting how much you're going to be paying for rent or school fees. Other than that, it's amazing. Give me my PR, Singapore government. Either way, I think that was going to be concluding some of it. So first of all, I wanted to thank everyone for joining our session of Scaling in APAC. And first of all, thank you so much, and the team at MediaShock for doing it. On your screen, you're currently going to have a poll coming up. Please help us to make the next episode better by filling it in. And if you're also interested in what we've been speaking about today, we'd love to have a chat to you about it. As you can tell, I love chatting, terrible at shutting up, but exceptional at talking. And I'm also very excited because on our next episode, we're going to have someone who I consider an inspiration of mine, quite a good friend of mine, and also one of the most successful founders in Singapore. So we have Prashant Agarwal, who's the founder of Money Hero, from 8 years, from starting it in his basement. I don't think it was his basement, but it sounds better when I word it that way, to raising $100 million to, well, last year, he IPO'd his company on the NASDAQ. So here is a person who's gone literally from scale, IPO, and basements. And that's why we're looking forward to sharing his entire journey with you and how you can also get inspiration in doing the same. So we thank everyone for joining. Thank you so much also to the team at MediaShock, and we hope everyone got value from it.
Right. Thank you as well, and see you really soon.